So, as my trip to Europe concludes, I want to share my time in Portugal. Hello, if you're new here, my name is Grant. I am a street and travel photographer who likes to share stories behind the photos I take. Let's begin, shall we? I'd like to share my photos that I've taken from my time in both Lisbon and Porto, as well as what stands out to me in these photos. In all, Portugal is a very colorful place, from the architecture to the food, which I sadly didn't get a chance to take any photos of the food, but I did of the landscapes while there. Unfortunately, I didn't get to spend enough time in Lisbon as I would like to, but I made the most out of this charming city. So I started my day catching a train to go to the center of Lisbon. And once walking around for a few minutes, I started to catch a glimpse of the colors from the first photo, which is a starter photo for that morning, as I was mesmerized by the yellows as well as the wires from looking above, and that there's a semblance of character to the rest of the architecture I'll see in the city. While I walked around Lisbon, the one thing in the city that stood out to me the most was the tiles on the buildings and how detail oriented this may have been when Lisbon was being built. The only thing was, sadly, the trolleys that went up the hills were not in service once I found out, although I still walked up the hills. Definitely worth the exercise to catch more amazing views of Lisbon in all its colors. And being up on those hills, I was able to capture amazing views of Lisbon from above, and even a few areas of the city that, as a visitor, I would never get to think about seeing or knowing they existed. So while exploring Lisbon, I managed to get a few more glimpses of the city, just walking on the hills to another hill to overlook the first hill that I can see from across the city. And when making my way back down the hill, I was able to capture more amazing architecture of Lisbon, with the occasional stop to look at the photos as well as writing notes about some of the photos if I want to describe them better. From my afternoon in Lisbon, I did capture this photo, which was one that made it down. Was one I made going down the hill. It gave me the impression of a more colorful version of Hogwarts, as the buildings and the bridge above it felt like I was at a castle, despite there were probably only shops and homes. As my time wrapped up in Lisbon, I felt as if I got to see a lot of the city in the short time frame that I did have. Eventually, I traveled to Porto, further north, and I had a bit of time till I could check into my hotel. So it gave me the opportunity to see a lot of Porto from the few hours I had to myself. And in all, when I thought of Porto, it just gave me this storybook kind of feeling, similar enough to something like Kiki's Delivery Service or something, just from my perspective, the whole city itself. But while walking around the city, and just like Lisbon, Porto has amazing and colorful architecture. And from walking around the city, I did get to catch a few amazing photos just from the architecture and, well, across this railway bridge overlooking the architecture in Porto. I was able to imagine it was like a castle that was on a hill, yet it was just buildings overlapping the hill, which that's most of what Porto is like. Oh, and I also can't forget that there are more tiles that have their own style and a sense of character, which makes these buildings much more interesting in what stories they have to offer. And while I spent my time in Porto, I was also able to experience the cuisine and catching more photos of everything around me. And as my time in Portugal came to a close, I spent my final evening in the park with locals, watching the sunset go down the hills, as it was a great way to close out my time in Europe and in Portugal in general. If you enjoyed this video, I'm happy that you did. Also, please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Hope to see you in the next one. And thanks again. Peace.